And I think when people are making changes, finding new jobs, they are oftentimes operating from that mindset of desperation because work has gotten so bad to that point where you're like, I have to leave immediately because of whatever situation is going on at work or you're burnt out. And so you're in that mindset of desperation, and that's not the best mindset to be in when you are looking for opportunities, because you're going to be, taking, I'll take whatever I can get, versus really taking that time to understand what it is, what it is you actually want, and what would make you feel fulfilled and get satisfaction, and really understanding that and working to find opportunities that fit that, versus being in this state of scarcity and fear, and operating out of that.
You're listening to Give Yourself Some Leeway with me, your host, Eugene Lee. Over the last 5 years, through my burnout experience, podcasting, and coaching, I have learned a lot about burnout recovery as a high achiever. What to do, what not to do, and the common mistakes that many people, like myself, make along the way. This podcast is dedicated to help you break the burnout cycle, optimize your life for peak performance when you need it most, and rediscovering how to truly enjoy living again. That's the key to your growth and success. What got you into coaching? Like taking that leap from a kind of a decorated background to go full time into coaching?
Yeah. And for people who haven't heard about my background, I went to Ivy League schools. So went to Princeton for undergrad, Wharton for an MBA. And I started my career out in finance working at JP Morgan. After business school, went to Google, where I moved out here to San Francisco, um, and then switched to work at startups. But all through these pivots that I made through my career, the common theme was I would work really hard, eventually get burned out, and decide to make a switch, make a career pivot, thinking that that would make things better. But eventually, after a couple years or less, the same feeling of unfulfillment would come back, and I never quite figured it, or sorry, it wasn't that I never. It took me a while to figure out what was missing. And every change, I always thought, oh, if I change industry, if I change my position, if I change my role, that might be the best way to move forward. And what I learned was that throughout all of these changes, I was constantly seeking purpose. And how I found that really was in my last corporate role. I was feeling stuck and really overwhelmed and just really unsure of what to do next. I felt like I've really tried everything I could. I've checked all the boxes, good schools, big corporate name jobs, small startups, and no matter what I tried, it's this feeling of lack of purpose, or feeling of something was missing, was still there. And so I decided to work with a coach to help me figure out what it is that I'm actually looking for, because I've tried all these things and nothing seemed to work. And so by working with a coach, I realized that she helped me understand my strengths and also my interests, and really digging deep to really understanding myself and how I unconsciously made decisions. And so one of the things that came out of the coaching was this common thread or theme of mentorship and coaching and helping people. And that was really what excited me and what made me feel like I was having an impact. And so I decided to explore coaching a little bit more in detail as a potential career path, and decided to enroll in a coaching certification program. And what's funny is that after I signed up to do this program, the original goal was to do it as a side hustle while I still worked in my corporate career. And a couple weeks after I signed up for the program, paid my deposit, I got laid off. So as part of all the tech layoffs that were happening last year, I was impacted by that. So I decided to take that as a sign from the universe to go all in on this path, and not exactly quite what I had planned, but it was a hand I was dealt with, and I decided to just go, take this big leap of faith to become a coach, and specifically a career clarity coach, because I feel that based on my experience of go through all the different career pivots that I've done, switching industries, switching roles, and really having that experience of understanding what it is to look for a purpose. And I think that's the key. That's who I want to help others with. I think there's too many people who feel stuck in jobs that they don't like or don't hate. It's just okay, or worse, they hate it. But I think we spend so much time working, at least 1/3 of our day, and that's a lot of time to be spending doing something you don't like or have no satisfaction from. So my goal is to really help people, especially high achievers like myself, um, who essentially feel stuck in their careers and want to make a change, but don't know where to go or how to make that change, and essentially help them find that career and life fulfillment.
That's great. And especially, I love how you mentioned high achievers, because I know people who are comfortable with mediocrity and they can say, I can work 9 to 5 and leave it at home and then, or leave it at work and then just go home and
Yeah.
it's out of my mind. But I even know myself that when I put so much time into work, even outside of work, I'm thinking of, okay, how am I going to prepare for the next day? And sometimes it's
Hmm.
like, oh, why are you preparing a presentation for like outside of work hours? And it's
Yeah.
not that I feel that I need to do this in order to get ahead, but sometimes it's I'm driven, especially in the work that I love doing. I'm driven to be like, if I do this, it will make things so much easier for me next week.
Yeah.
And it's not about doing something that is, let's say, taking up the whole weekend preparing a project for next week so that I can try and get ahead. It's like kind
Yeah.
of eating into that, but it's about I care so much about the work that I do that it's
Yeah.
always in the back of my mind and how I can make it better. It's
Yeah.
so if you've got that kind of mindset in terms of high achieving, high performing, you want to be doing something that you actually enjoy, that you get satisfaction out of. So like it's regardless of whether you're doing a job that you hate or a job that you love, more than likely that's the kind of mindset you're going to have about the work that you do if you care about the work. So it might as well be something that you enjoy,
Yeah.
especially when we spend
Absolutely.
what I think it's 35 to 42 hours. I don't know what the minimum hours are for people, uh, but like that's, I mean, 40 hours or 8 hours a day, a
Yeah.
minimum is how long you're thinking about work. And if you're getting a good bit of sleep, if that again, as you said, it's about 30% of your day.
Yeah.
So it might as well be something that you enjoy doing.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. That's 100% what I see as well. And I think, especially for high achievers, you are so used to excellence and being top of your class or performance, and there is a standard that you want to maintain. And so yes, you are constantly thinking about work, whether you want to or not. There is always, unconsciously, probably it's always there. And that can bleed over into other areas of your life, especially if you're not happy or feeling unfulfilled. I know, here in the US, there's this term Sunday scaries. So every time Sunday rolls around, you're anxious or just not looking forward to Monday. And I think that's not a great way to live your life. Like, why do you subject yourself to that? You should be looking forward to a job that you like, and doing things that you get satisfaction from. And so yeah, I feel really passionate about this.
And just as when you mentioned the Sunday scaries, it reminded me of another phenomenon that I came across is like sleep procrastination, where
Oh
people
yes.
stay up all night on their phones because they don't want to go to bed because as soon as they go to bed, that means the start of the next day at work. And
Yep.
it's like these things that people normalize, and they're like, oh, it's just me scrolling Instagram at 3 a.m. because I don't want to face work tomorrow. But everyone does that. But they normalize these behaviors because they don't like the work that they do. But
Yeah.
they kind of still live in that mediocrity. They also and sabotaging themselves while living in that mediocrity because they're not doing the work that they want to do, often feeling because the work that they want to do is outside of their reach, or
Yes.
it's easier to stay in the mediocrity, the comfort of not liking the work you do, but it's what I've been doing for so long. I
Yeah.
don't want to take the leap and risk not getting a job like this again or not having that comfort zone.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I commonly see that, and the you know, similar to that, the it's it's funny that when I talk to high performers or high achievers, and you place this standard on yourself to really be the best, and yet you're settling, as you said, for mediocrity in your job, and it's a little counterintuitive, but by settling and being okay with whatever you're feeling around the work, you're actually not letting yourself be the high performer or high achiever that you can be when it comes to your work. And I think a lot of that is because of this fear. You touched on this fear of uncertainty, this fear of not being able to find another job that's giving you what you currently have, whether it's the salary or the benefits, or this feeling of performance, because there's a fear of also starting over and not being able to get where you currently are, and so you settle. And what I usually tell clients is to think about the fact that you're not starting over. You have all this experience up until this point, and you've managed to, wherever you've been, you've managed to grow from where you first started to where you are now. And so you've done it before, so you can do it again. And the idea of the sphere of uncertainty, where you don't know, and so you hold yourself back. And you were mentioning about this idea of like applying for jobs and not applying for roles because you don't feel like you tick every single job description requirements, even though those are usually soft soft requirements. And so not taking that risk actually holds you back, in this fear of, well, what if I don't get it? If you don't get it, it's the same as you currently are. There's no change. Whereas if you think about the positive, what if you do get it? Then now there's all these options available to you. So a lot of it really is just reframing a lot of the thoughts that are in your head, especially around these fears, to either focus on the potential, especially when it's about the unknown, and this fear of starting over or failing or rejection. These are all learning opportunities, and kind of reframing that in your head as opportunities, um, rather than things to hold you back.
Yeah, I love that, especially as we were talking earlier, even before the call, about applying for jobs, and you look at the list of requirements, whether it be hard requirements or soft requirements, and it's like, oh, if I don't take all the boxes, and on some of them the descriptions could have like 20 different things, and
Mm-hmm.
that could be something that maybe a hiring manager was like, oh, these could be advantageous, but let's stick the whole list there and
Yeah.
just have as many keywords as possible so that we can have a wider net or a wider bandwidth of applicants. But then you have the applicants, and they think that they need to meet every single requirement in order to fulfill this role. And I was in the job market about just over a year ago. And when I see something, I'd say, okay, I can meet, if I can meet four, like a 4 or 5 out of 10, if I can meet about even 50% of this, I'm applying,
Hmm.
because I can say, look, I'm bringing this much experience to the table in half of what you're looking for, and it gives me bandwidth to learn more. I was like, okay, I can
Yeah.
bring this much to the table, so it means that I can do this much, and also while I'm doing this much, I can learn the other skills. And
Yeah.
if they're like, and I had some cases where I had interviews and I tried to explain that. I said, look, this I can do this, but is there room for me to learn the other skills? And
Hmm.
they're like kind of flabbergasted, looking at me being like, no, if you don't know how to do this, why did you apply for the job? And I was like, okay, great. And that for me was the red flag. It was,
Hmm.
okay, they're not willing to train me. They're
Yeah.
looking for someone who's fully trained, who's just going to sit into this role and not ask any questions. That's a
Yeah.
toxic environment for me. And I
Right.
was like, great. I was like, you've answered my question. I don't want to work here. And I
Hmm.
went straight on to the next interview. Whereas I know a lot of people who won't apply unless they tick all the boxes.
Yeah.
And they feel that if they go for an interview, and if they get told, no, you have to have all the requirements, they feel, oh, I feel silly. I feel like such a failure for, and such an embarrassment for coming to this interview unprepared, that I should be able to do everything they're asking of me. It's for me, the interview process, it's kind of like speed dating.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
like
Yeah.
you bring it to the table, you're like, look, this is what I am, this is what I have to offer, and this is where, like there are similarities, but we do have like different interests. But hey,
Hmm.
I'm willing to explore hiking or explore theater or something with you. And if the other person's like, no, I'm trying to find someone who has all the same likes and dislikes as I do,
Yeah.
otherwise it's not going to work. It's like, well, okay, that's not the relationship you're looking for. The same
Yeah.
with the job market. If you don't click with in the interview phase, or if you're like, okay, this is going to be a really really difficult, I'm going to be out of my comfort zone, and I'm going to be out of my depth, but I'm not going to get any help along the way, then that's a no for me.
Yeah.
I think that's how I felt in the job market only over a year ago, and I know that's the way a lot of other people feel. But I think the important part is getting out of your comfort zone and just applying anyway. It's
Yeah.
like, look, this is what I'm bringing to the table. The worst thing they can do is say no, and you, as you said, if you don't apply, it was a solid no anyway. So you're
Yeah.
giving your
Exactly.
chance. You're giving yourself an opportunity for them to say yes just by applying.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think what you touched on in terms of people feeling like they need to meet all of the descriptions, having written job descriptions myself, I know that everything I'm listing, there's not a single person. It would be like finding a unicorn who actually meets every single thing that you're writing or listing on the description. And often people forget that an interview, it's a two-way interview. You're interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing you. And so I think people get really caught up in this, I have to present the best foot forward. And like you said, if it doesn't work out, that's a failure on my part. And it's really not. It's because an interview is a two-way interview. If it doesn't work out, then it's probably a good thing in the long run, because either, like you said, it would not have been a good fit, or you weren't exactly what they were looking for, and that whether whether you think you could have done it or not, the role, if you were actually put in that role, then maybe it would put you out of your depth or out of your comfort zone in a bad way. What I like to say when it comes to being out of your comfort zone, it is something that I think is good, because it challenges you to grow and to learn. But there's a fine line between being so out of your comfort zone that it's actually uncomfortable, and you're in this fear mindset versus the growth mindset. And so yes, I just want to say that being out of your comfort zone isn't always a bad thing, but it can be a good thing too.
And for someone who needs to get out of their comfort zone, let's say they're kind of sick of the mediocrity, they want to get out of their comfort zone, but they don't know how much of a challenge they can take? Is there a way of gauging that based on um, maybe their personality or maybe their past experiences? How do you gauge if you're sick of being in the mediocrity of your current job and you want to try something new, but you're not sure how much of a challenge you can take on?
Yeah, I call it really it's basically, are you excited by the challenge? Do you still feel like it's challenging and you're going to be out of your comfort zone, but you're still excited by the opportunity, and you think you'll learn from this process and or from the opportunity. And so I think those are good indicators to whether that challenge is a good challenge for you. If you don't feel like you're going to learn, if you don't feel like it's something that excites you, it's so scary that it's making you feel like not excited, then I would say that's not the right opportunity for you. So really getting in tune with your feelings and how you feel around or opportunities that come up, and just really taking that time to really assess how you feel, rather than either constantly chasing shiny objects and shiny objects, new things, or taking opportunities because other people told you that would be a good idea. So oftentimes, especially for people who have been on a certain path after school, you've been in this career, gone this career path for such a long time because of what you studied in school, or your parents or society told you that this was the right path for you. But now you're reaching this point where you're like, okay, I've done this for so long, but I don't actually love it. And so really finding out what it is that excites you, what makes you interested, and what makes you want to get out of bed to work. So really taking that step to really understand what it is that you want, is a way to really help you figure out whether that challenge is the right next step for you.
I love that because it echoes so much of, I mean, hindsight is 2020. When I look back at my
Mm-hmm.
previous role, I was in it for almost 10 years. And looking back on it, I was in mediocrity for so long. But the way I was looking for my purpose was that I was working my 12-hour shift and then looking for purpose outside, doing a side
Mm-hmm.
hustle, taking on volunteering for different activities,
Mm-hmm.
and doing going back to uni part time while working full time. And it was like, no, I needed that drive. I needed to upskill and challenge myself because I wasn't getting that in my day to day work.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't want to give up the comfort that I had gotten in the mediocrity of my day-to-day work, that
Yeah.
it was certainty, it was
Mm-hmm.
it was a pay slip. And over time, like I completely burnt out in that role as
Mm-hmm.
a result, because I was taking on way too much. I was way over my capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And uh and people said, oh, you've burnt out, you're pivoting into a new job. When was how long, or let's say, what's your new job since you left that job? And I was like, no, I didn't leave that job straight away, because I understood that I loved the nature of the work that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And but I knew that there was something missing, or there was something that wasn't sitting well with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized then, like I stayed in the job, I'd say about another 2 years after I'd burnt out. And on my self reflection, recovery from that, I realized I loved the work that I did, but the nature of the role had changed over the course of 10 years. Also,
Yeah.
my values had changed over the course of
Yeah.
10 years. So, what attracted me to the role 10 years ago, I had fulfilled. And now
Mm-hmm.
I was living in that mediocrity of being like, okay, I'm no longer challenged. I'm looking for external challenges
Yeah.
without leaving the role that I was comfortable in. And I
Mm-hmm.
got to a point where I was like, am I comfortable staying in this role and looking for those external motivators, external challenges in order to stay where I am? Or do I need to look elsewhere and can I find work that I am equally challenged at while also being in a comfortable, or having that psychological safety,
Yeah.
that I'm comfortable in the work that I do, but also being challenged. And that's when I had to hand in my notice. I was like, okay, I know that, and it wasn't from a I need to get the hell out of here, but
Hmm.
I had gotten to a point where I realized this is where I felt challenged 10 years ago,
Hmm.
and I am doing someone else a disservice by staying in this role because there might be someone 10 years younger who would love this opportunity to be challenged to grow,
Yeah.
and I'm holding that back from them by staying here. So me leaving this position gives them an opportunity to step in and gives me an opportunity to find something that works for me, that challenges me onto my next step in the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that because I think people forget that companies change, you change. And so what worked for you, like you said, 10 years ago, probably isn't working now because it's been 10 years. Roles change, companies change, the direction changes, strategy changes. So a lot can change in 10 years. And if you're still in that same role, you're right. You're doing a disservice to yourself, not only yourself, but also the company probably, because they could have someone else, they could have hire someone else who is more motivated and ultimately better for the company. I think one of the things that like when you were talking that made me think of something is that when you when you are exploring your values and really understanding where you are, it's okay for that to change. And I think people get really sometimes hung up and stuck because they feel like they need to stay exactly where they are. But you grow and change, and so it's okay for that to change. I think as high achievers, we're so used to being the best that um, when it comes to new opportunities or new challenges, you will find a way to become really good at it because that's just the nature of your how you work. High achievers, high performers, like easily become really good at things. So when you think about opportunities that are, a lot of people talk about opportunities that play on your strengths. I think as high achievers, that can be a little bit challenging because you're so good at so many different things that you need to look more things outside of just your strengths, and that's where interests come in and your passions. And what you said, you were seeking that fulfillment and purpose outside of work. And so that's definitely a great first step to seek that. um, but ultimately, I think what really helps the feeling of purpose and that finding that flow in the work in your career is to bring that into your work, bring that fulfillment and that purpose into your work. And so that's when you start to really operate at that, um, even more of a high performer, high achiever, because you're operating from a sense of purpose and fulfillment versus the mediocrity.
So for me, it was when I recognized that I was looking for fulfillment outside of work rather than in the job itself, that I realized I was in mediocrity and not challenged. I
Mhm.
was waiting until clock out, and then it was going back to uni doing my degree part-time, or going back to I was doing voluntary activities. I was involved in theater and production and things, and that was all part-time. And I was like, oh, these are just my hobbies that keep me going. But I realized that I was putting so much time and effort into them that I could have been putting into work that challenged me. Are there
Mhm.
um any other traits or any other things that you might see in high achievers, that they're doing other activities or they're doing certain behaviors that signal that maybe I am living in mediocrity, or I'm under challenged by the work that I do, and this is my external motivator, or this is a sign that maybe I'm not challenged by the work that I do, that I'm living in mediocrity, or living in that comfort, and it's no
Mhm.
longer serving me. And maybe now is the time for me to take a step up and find my next challenge.
Yeah, I think when when it comes to burnout, people often, obviously the most obvious symptom of burnout or sign of burnout is you're overworking, you have too much on your plate, you're overcapacity. But people often forget that there's the flip side where you're not challenged, you're not motivated, you're bored, probably at work. Those are also signs of burnout. And you had talked about this when you were talking about your experience and recognizing that. And so I think for people who are feeling bored or unmotivated and feeling unchallenged, I think those are definitely signs of burnout or that you need a change. Other signs I would say that you probably don't recognize as burnout is the environment that you're in. So whether it comes to the manager or the company, the team, the environment you're working in, if the values of the company don't align with yours, that is also a sign that you should find some place that fits more along with your values, your own values, and what you're looking for. An example of this is one of the startups I worked at. The company direction was always prioritizing other projects than the ones that I was working on. So I was constantly under-resourced, constantly fighting for prioritization on my projects. And that constant fighting or constant need to fight or constant need to prove that my work needed attention, it definitely led to burnout because I wasn't getting the resources I needed. I wasn't getting the attention I needed from senior management or my manager. And so those are all signs that clearly the work I'm doing is not a priority for the company. So maybe it's time for me to move on, or the role that I was in needs to change. And so I think a lot of times we focus a lot on what we feel, but we often don't take into account the circumstances or the environment you're in. And that can also play a huge role. I think recognizing when your manager or senior leadership or the company culture and values, if those are not a good fit for you as well, then that's also a sign that it should be time for you to move on.
And when you realize, okay, it's time for me to move on, but you have I like to call it the niggling negative self narrative. You have all these limiting beliefs that are holding you back. What are the most common ones that you have seen in people that they try to normalize? That is there is like, oh yes, I'm not motivated, and yes, I'm kind of living with the golden handcuffs, or I'm living with just living in that mediocrity and comfort zone,
Mm-hmm.
but I can't take the leap, or I can't I can't risk a setback. That what is the thought that they have that holds them back the most from facing a new challenge or developing the next step in their career?
Yeah, the most common thing I see is this: they may recognize that they want to make a change. Things are not ideal. And so they want to make a change, but they don't know where to go or what to do next. I think that lack of clarity around where to go, or that lack of certainty, what I was saying about earlier, is wanting to have a crystal ball to know exactly what will happen, but unfortunately that doesn't exist. And so because that doesn't exist, people will be like, well, I don't know what will happen, things could be worse, and this, it's not that bad, so right now, so I'll just stay here because it's not that bad, things could be worse. And so people often tend to think really focus on the negative. And the saying of the grass isn't always greener. That's really what people are thinking. And so to overcome that, really, I think, is to what I mentioned a little bit earlier is, instead of focusing on the negative, start to think about the possibilities and the options that could become available if you were to, take that step forward. And yes, there is still uncertainty, but really understanding what level of uncertainty you're comfortable with, and finding ways to decrease that uncertainty. So, when it comes to this lack of clarity of what to do next, um, working with a coach or by yourself to figure out, okay, what are my interests? What roles do I see that interest me? And exploring that. You don't have to take it. Not everything is, one big giant step, right? So you can take little steps to figure out, okay, what is it that interests me for a role that I know that looks interesting. Talk to someone in that specific role. Understand what it is they understand in more detail what they do, how they got there. Is there anything that some aspect of that you could do, whether it's transferable skills or what you think you may need in order to feel comfortable to, apply for that role, for example. Is it courses? Is it, upskilling? What, that idea of pursuing more challenges to help you grow, to ultimately lead you to your next step, is how I see it. And so it's taking those little steps to figure out more what you're interested in, what excites you. You yourself, you were saying that you were finding purpose and fulfillment in your activities outside of work, and you were going back to uni and taking classes. And so that may be the right step for some people. It might be other things. So it's about exploring and really taking those little steps, because it's not everything has to be, I have to quit my job today and, find something right away. It takes time. And so I think a lot of times it's really just taking those small steps to decrease that uncertainty, to help you feel more comfortable with ultimately making that change.
Yeah, I think that, and that's from my experience as well with people, that they feel that there's only the option of staying in the mediocrity or taking the leap and hoping for the best, that there's no
Yeah.
middle ground. And the one thing I emphasize is that only take the leap without compromising your psychological safety. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you have responsibilities, you have bills to pay, you've got a mortgage, you have to take care of your family. Don't quit your job just because you don't like it. It's like, okay, you don't like the job, let's explore opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, take a night class or something
Yeah.
in an area that you'd be interested in, or do an online course.
Mm-hmm.
If it's something that you don't know which direction to go in, and there's only so much self-reflection you can do without those
Yeah.
negative narratives getting in the way, then reach out to a coach or a mentor, or reach out to a
Mm-hmm.
friend to have that conversation, and just try and be open to, oh, do you remember that thing you used to do when you were a kid? Are
Yeah.
you still interested in that hobby? Or do you remember that volunteering you used to do with your dad? Is that something that you would be like to do again, and just contribute and get out there and network? And it's just the small things. And then you explore that and you say like, oh no, I hated when I did that with my dad. And it's like, okay, now you can rule out that's not an
Mm-hmm.
option for you right now. And
Yeah.
it's more about kind of ruling out all the things that you don't want to do. And then
Mm-hmm.
it opens up, okay, I haven't tried that yet. I already know that I don't like all of those things. Maybe I can figure out if I like this or not. And it kind of opens up new pathways. So that's and if you do want to quit a job, and then say it's like, oh, I want to go become a solopreneur, but I have bills to pay. It's like, great. How much of uh, how many months of savings do you need to
Mm-hmm.
build up before you can go on that career path? Would you be
Yeah.
happy with 6 months, 12 months, paying off your car loan, paying off your any short-term loans, and having 6 to 12 months of your mortgage plus a bit of capital for starting that business? Then you can go and pursue that opportunity. But it gives you that direction. Yes, you're maybe living in the mediocrity of a job that you don't like, and with it you have the certainty of a salary or a payslip,
Mm-hmm.
but you're working in a direction. you're working towards your future, towards a challenge, towards the growth and development. It's about, yes, you can stay in that mediocrity and work towards where you want to go, rather than just dwelling in that mediocrity and
Yeah.
living on autopilot with no sense of direction.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And I actually often tell people that you can continue to live in this mediocrity rather than taking steps and being proactive, because ultimately you are the CEO, you're the owner of your career. So you need to be the one taking action. And if you're not, then sometimes your hand may be forced on you, or like getting laid off. Now you're in the state of panic, and now you have to find a job, versus if you have been taking all these steps to self-reflect or explore, you're now unprepared for this massive change. So either you can be proactive and really take control of your career and take these steps to think about what you want to do next, especially when you're in this level of mediocrity, or you stay in the mediocrity, and in certain situations you may be forced to make a change. And so taking that action to really be the owner and drive your career the way you want to, rather than having that change forced on you, is definitely the best, better way forward.
You just touched on something that I covered recently about being the CEO, being the
Yeah.
CEO of your role. And
Yeah.
so people just take the back seat and they say, oh, everything about my job, I hate it, and nothing's going to change for the better, and no
Hmm.
one is doing anything around here, but they still take the back seat themselves.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, well, if you were the CEO of your department, what would you do? And just brainstorm with them through that. If you were the CEO of this role, what would you expect of yourself? What would you expect of the CEO?
Hmm.
And then once they get that kind of brainstorming, I'm like, okay, why don't you show up every day in the mindset of the CEO and see
Hmm.
what changes? If that
Hmm.
you have the power to change, and if you don't make the decisions to change, then someone else is going to make those decisions for you, and they're going to
Exactly.
dictate where you go in your role in your job.
Yeah.
And it's having that mindset shift rather than saying, well, this is the glass ceiling I have in my role. I can't go any further, so I might as well take a back seat. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, as soon as you take that back seat, you're no longer taking responsibility or accountability for the work that you do. Then you're handing the reins over to someone else.
Yeah.
Whereas you have the potential every day to step up and make those decisions. And if you find yourself in a position where you're like, oh well, I don't have the authority to do that anymore, then maybe it's a time to, like, if you've been handing off the reins and handing away the responsibilities for so long in your career and it's difficult to get them back, then it's kind of like, because you've been handing them off to other team members for so long, they're not going to expect you to step up. And if you
Hmm.
get to a point where it's hard for you to step up, then it might be time to either change career or make it very clear that you, and be vulnerable with them and be like, look, I've taken the backseat for too long, but I want to show responsibility. I want to show leadership here. And if they
Yeah.
respect that, which nine times out of 10, I would hope that they would,
Hmm.
if someone is willing to step up and take driving responsibility, then they 100% do that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think people forget that you are the CEO of your career, and people often do take a back seat because they're so used to listening to other people dictate the way forward. And so taking that ownership, taking accountability for yourself, just remembering that only you can make the change that you want. Otherwise, it's forced on you. And so, wouldn't you rather you have a say in what happens going forward versus just going with whatever is handed to you? So, yeah, you're the what's the saying? You're the creator of, or the creator of your future, or something along those lines. Yeah, only you can do that.
And if someone does want to, let's say, move on to a new career, but I mean, like when you said that you started your coaching certification and you got laid off, that created a sense of urgency for you to be like, okay, well, now I really have to take things seriously. I really have to get the ball rolling if this is something I want to pursue. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
do you feel? I think that landed well for you. You were already pursuing a new career,
Mm-hmm.
and so that when things went all right, that you were like, oh well, at least I already have a plan. I have something I'm working towards. Do you feel that that's something that people should have a vision towards, even if they are in mediocrity, that they should have a future vision of where or development of where they want to go, that in the event that things go not the way they intended, that they have a backup plan, or at least that
Mm-hmm.
they're openly networking or something, that they hit the ground running,
Mm-hmm.
or they have some kind of contingency plan if tomorrow morning they're out of work.
Yeah, I definitely think you should always be thinking about what your goals are, what your vision is. And I think oftentimes people are going through life without that very clear in their heads. And so it's like, navigating a car or a plane or a ship where you don't know where your direction you're going. You're just on autopilot, but you're kind of just going wherever it takes you. And I think having that vision or that goal of ultimately what you're working towards can help you in those moments when things go awry, as you mentioned. Then you have that future to look forward to. You have that destination in mind of what you're working towards. And it doesn't have to be a fully baked, backup plan. I definitely didn't have a fully baked backup plan. I was just like, well, I was exploring this, and now I'm like, okay, well, let me explore it some more and see where it goes. And if it doesn't work out, I know I can always interview for another job, right? So yeah, so having that clear vision of where you want to go to act essentially as your compass and help you navigate your future and help you navigate what steps to take to move forward. And so I think oftentimes people lack that. People lack that vision or that clarity, or in their heads. I think people unconsciously know that what they want, but they haven't crystallized that. So, of course, everyone wants to retire, have money to be, living off of that is enough to sustain their retirement and live the life that they want. But to really get really clear, crystal clear on what that actually looks like, especially from a work perspective. And it doesn't have to be retirement. It could be like, okay, what is the actual ideal dream job or career for you? Especially if you are in this mediocrity, you've lost sight of that. So figuring out what that is and taking steps to move towards that, like I said, like, what we were talking about earlier, it doesn't have to be one big step to, one step to reach it. And most of the time, it's not going to be one step to reach it. It will be many smaller steps. And so, as long as you're working towards that, and that's where you can start to have that plan and that having choices available to you when things do go awry or things don't work out, then you have a plan in place.
And what are your thoughts on people taking a sabbatical or a gap year in between roles? Because I know a lot of people there, like I've had friends who were in law and they said, oh, I'm going to take a sabbatical. And they were told, oh, you can't do that. You'll completely like derail your career if you take even 6 months off, because that
Mhm.
gap in your resume, that's going to be a big like red flag that no one's going to want to employ you. Even in I was told when I first started podcasting, they were like, "Oh, you doing this podcasting is actually career suicide." And it was just people like deflecting and being like uncomfortable with things, but and trying to
Yeah.
be like, "I'm offering you good advice here, but you're committing career suicide by doing something like this. You're going to derail your any chance of ever being employed." So
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of fear around these things, like a sabbatical or a gap year,
Yeah.
that people say, everyone around them is saying, oh, you're going to derail any chance of you ever being employed again. That all this hard work you've put in over the years, you're risking all of that
Yeah.
by taking 6 to 12 months for yourself.
Yeah. And I would say definitely not true. So I've been through three layoffs. My very first layoff was from Google, and they had made changes to my team and decided my team was no longer needed. They changed priorities. And so that was my very first layoff. And now at the time, I had the option to find another job within the company or to take the severance and leave. And so at the time, I was doing a lot of self reflection, and I realized I was very burned out from working at Google. I was constantly striving for something striving for that next promotion because I thought that was what you should be doing. And I didn't realize at the time that I had outgrown the company. And so I was no longer getting the growth or the challenges or the excitement that you should be getting in a career. And so I decided to take the severance, and take some time off. I took a sabbatical, and which turned into a year long, and took that time to really do the things that I wanted to do. I pursued personal passion projects. I traveled. I did yoga teacher training, and I even started a travel blog. And so there were all these things that I started to do, and I felt so much happier and had so much more excitement about my life and my day to day. And I definitely heard the same exact, the things that you just mentioned. You should never have a gap on your resume. You're not going to be able to find a job. This is career suicide. And I just followed my gut because I felt that there's always going to be a job. And worst case, I go work at Starbucks or something. It may not be ideal, but there's definitely always going to be a job somewhere. And so I took a year off, one of the best years of my life. And ultimately, you know what? There were still plenty of jobs available when I decided I was ready to go back to work. And I was still hireable. I still got hired. And so all those fears that people were putting on me in terms of saying you shouldn't do that, really just was untrue. And so I think if you want to take a sabbatical, definitely consider what you want to get out of that and why you want to do it. I was doing it because I was burnt out and I wanted to take time for myself. And yes, there was some of those fears around jobs, but once I changed that thinking around jobs, that okay, if I really am running out of money, I can always work at a Starbucks or anything. There is always a job. And so once I got that in my head that it's not a forever type of situation, and I calculated my finances to figure out, okay, how much time can I take off without working, and made plans around it, and that made the feeling of the fear, the uncertainty decreased a lot. And so that made me a lot more comfortable to actually take that step to take that time off. And so I would encourage people who want to take sabbaticals to really consider that as a legitimate option rather than listening to all the fears that people may be putting onto you.
Yeah, what you did there was planning it out ahead of time, is giving yourself that psychological safety that you're not
Mm-hmm.
going out of your depth,
Mm-hmm.
just quitting the job and taking sabbatical. The next thing, finding yourself, oh, I actually don't know what I'm going to do, and getting overwhelmed again.
Mm-hmm.
But it's about planning it ahead. If I want to take the sabbatical, what do I need to have in place? What plans do I
Mm-hmm.
need to have in place? And do I need to have a contingency plan in place if I do need to go work in Starbucks or something, just to
Mm-hmm.
get by? Uh, like for me, when I handed in my notice, people were like, "Oh, so I take it when you leave here on Friday, you're starting in a new job somewhere on Monday." And I was like, no, I'm just going home. I do need some time for myself and
Mhm.
to be in a clearer headspace while interviewing as well. That
Exactly.
for my next role, I want to be in a better headspace.
Yeah.
And also I felt that interviewing while in the other role, that it was like, oh, I need to either do it on my day off, try and plan with an interviewer on my day off, or else try and book a day's paid leave in order to go sit an interview. I wasn't going to be in the right mindset going to that role. So I felt that I was about I had a 3 month break between my two jobs, that and I felt that that was necessary for me to be in the right headspace, that I wasn't desperate for the work, and
Hmm.
that I had that psychological safety, that the next job I wanted to go into was something that I felt was right, that got me excited and got me challenged,
Yeah.
that I was able to operate from a place, as I said, psychological safety, so that if I'm making a change in my career, I'm not doing it out of desperation.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think when people are making changes, finding new jobs, they are oftentimes operating from that mindset of desperation because work has gotten so bad to that point where you're like, I have to leave immediately because of whatever situation is going on at work, or you're burnt out. And so you're in that mindset of desperation. And that's not the best mindset to be in when you are looking for opportunities, because you're going to be, taking, I'll take whatever I can get, versus really taking that time to understand what it is, what it is you actually want, and what would make you feel fulfilled and get satisfaction, and really understanding that and working to find opportunities that fit that, versus being in this state of scarcity and fear, and operating out of that. And so if it means taking time, a sabbatical, a few months, great. If you feel, or you're in this, like we've been talking about, you're in this current state of mediocrity, you're definitely in a better mindset than if you're in this desperation, where you really need to make a change immediately because things have gotten so bad.
And for anyone who wants to get clearer on their career direction and get that clarity, and not make those mistakes where they're operating from a place of desperation, what's the best place for them to get in touch with you, Alice?
Yeah, my website is aliceyehcoaching.com. And that's where you can learn more about what I do, learn more about me. I also you can also follow me on Instagram at Hey Alice Yeh, or find me on LinkedIn, and I'm sure Eugene will share all my links.
Yeah, all the links will be in the show notes.
Exactly. And yeah, and the other thing I'd actually like to mention is, I didn't mention it earlier, but I should have. But I actually have a resource, a free career checkup guide, as I call it, and that's really a way for people, if you're in the state of, well, I'm not sure if I really need to make a change, or things are okay, but I don't really know what to do next. This guide is supposed to help you figure out what are priorities for you, and help you assess if your current role is ideal for you or not. And so people can download this at bit.ly/career checkup guide. And that's a way for people to kind of just do a pulse check on their career, and see where they are currently, and if their priorities and values are aligned with their current role.
Awesome, great. So we'll stick that pulse check also in the show notes if anyone wants to just see where they are. I think that's important for people as well, just um to check in with themselves, even if
Mm-hmm.
they feels like, no, I think I'm pretty happy with my career, but it's something that you can just check in and be like, okay, it gives you the concrete um feeling that or the affirmation as well, that you're like, oh no, I thought that I was fully content with my career. Maybe I'm not. Maybe it's something I can question, or else
Mm-hmm.
realize, no, this confirms why I love my job so much as well. So that's why
Mm-hmm.
it's good to do these pulse checks.
Yeah, exactly. And it helps also give you a clearer sense of, what that future vision or that ideal that you want to work towards. If Even if you are in a state where you're like, oh, things are okay, it can give you some insight into what to look for next if things ever change.
That's great. Alice, thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you're feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, stuck in a rut, or running in circles all the time, trust me, I've been there too. The pursuit for peak performance, especially as a high achiever, is not about pushing harder all the time. It's about learning to work smarter, find balance, and reignite that spark that got you started in the first place. That's why I developed the Burnout Recovery Blueprint. Join me for 12 weeks to overcome your burnout. Let's break the burnout cycle and restore your vitality. Develop sustainable habits proven for peak performance when you need it most. Rediscover the meaning and purpose in the work that you do. And boost your productivity and impact without sacrificing your health. If you're ready to invest in your personal growth and success, let's break the burnout cycle together. Let's work together. Let's have that call. The link is in the show notes. Until next week, take care.